Okay. Welcome. I look psychotic. I look very funny right now. I have music going on in the background that I'm hoping is not copyrighted. And I'm just doing a very colorful look because I really had no plan. I hope the comments on this live work. They weren't working a little bit ago. We'll see if they work this time. Why did that make my jawline absolutely disappear? That sucks. Anyways, I'll go back in with some contour. So, I made an option, or like a poll a bit ago, talking about which killer y'all want to hear about, and, I don't remember if people chose Fish or Bobby Joe Long, but I think y'all chose Albert Fish. So I'm pretty sure that was the one that people showed most interest to. So that is the one that I will be talking about. I didn't do research beforehand. I'm just gonna go off of what I remember and hope it doesn't go poorly. So yay, we love improvising. Let's go. Okay, so Albert Fish, I don't remember the year, but I do remember that he's a piece of shit, like every other serial killer you can think of. Basically, he would prey on children, which is horrendous. And in the years that he was active, before he was caught, thank God he was caught, he would find people in newspaper ads and prey on them when they were most vulnerable. He would attack people in a very poverty-stricken area. He found neighborhoods that there were multiple people living in the same house and the police didn't really care about because it was like so poverty-stricken. He would find people in those unfortunate circumstances and he would prey on them. So the case that he's most known for is in, I forgot the year, but one year he went to somebody's house to take them up on a newspaper ad. There was a newspaper ad. This boy was looking for a job. He said he was offering labor for like farms and stuff because farming was really popular back then. So this was in, I think it's in the 80s, maybe the 70s. Don't quote me on that though. So he would go to this place, Albert Fish would, under an alias. So he didn't go by his actual name. Thank you. I don't know the animal. I'm really just messing around with colors. It's not supposed to be anything. I'm just letting creative liberty take me wherever it's taking me. I have no idea what. I don't have a plan. The only plan I have is talking about a killer. Yeah, so, oh wait, no, I'm glad that comments are working. Thank you for saying that. So now that I know comments are working. Anyways, so, yeah, Albert Fish went to this place under an alias, and he was wealthy. Albert Fish was wealthy. He had money. He was in a suit and a tie. He looked really, like put together. So these people trusted him. They trusted him to pay their kid. So he came over to this person's house because of the news ad in the paper, and he offered a lot of money for the time. He offered to pay hourly, and it really would have benefited the family. So they were encouraging the boy. He was like, yes, absolutely, take this job. We need money. And this family had a little girl as well. They had a daughter, and so she came out while Albert Fish and the family were meeting, again, they didn't know who Albert Fish was. He didn't use his real name. But yeah, the daughter came out into the living room and they were talking about taking the job. And then the daughter says hi to Albert Fish. And then he went to this place originally because he wanted to abduct the boy. But after seeing his sister, he was a lot more interested in the sister. So he actually ended up making an excuse to abduct the sister, but he would have to come back the next day because what was happening was the boy who he was originally coming to pay wanted to go get his friend. His friend wanted a job. His friend needed a job as well, so the boy was like, okay, if you come back tomorrow, I will have another kid to do labor for you. And then we'll just get a lot more work done. So Albert Fish accepted, and he was going to come back the next day, early in the morning, with his car to take these boys to his farm, which he didn't actually have. That did not blend very well. We're going to get some more green. So yeah, he went to this place to get two boys, or one boy he thought, and then the next day when he came back to get the two boys, he saw the sister, and he changed his mind. He ended up actually wanting to take the sister. So because he saw the sister the day before, he came early in order to go through with the plan that he had. So Albert Fish went to their house, supposedly to pick up the boys and take them back to his farm, which he didn't have, again. But he showed up earlier than the family was expecting. So he made an excuse. He was like, hey, my niece is having a birthday party a couple blocks down. I can take your daughter, because the daughter at the time, I think she was 8. He was like, yeah, I can take your daughter, and then she could be friends with my niece. And so, using that excuse, the family was hesitant, obviously, because they didn't know this guy, and they were offering to take their child to a birthday party. But, you know, what's the harm? They didn't want to upset their son's new employer. So, he took this little girl. I feel so bad I cannot remember her name right now. I just remember it being a very pretty name. But he took her to, supposedly, what he said, his niece's birthday party. So as he's walking down the street, he turns left, which is very important because, as the parents recall in later interviews, if they had recalled a very simple detail, they think that their child would still be alive. That detail being, there were no houses to the left of them. It was an open road. There were no homes. There was nothing. There wasn't any buildings over there. It was just an open road. And they thought if they had remembered that, then maybe their child would still be alive. So they definitely blamed themselves, which is really sad. But yeah, Albert Fish ended up taking this little girl to a empty house, just an abandoned house, and there was a little garden out front. So that's where they spent while the parents were really freaking out. At first, they were like, Albert Fish told the parents that he would return in a couple of hours. He would come back with their daughter after the party to come and get the boys. And so the boys were just waiting at home, and they were waiting for Albert Fish to come back and bring them to their new job and hopefully make some money. But then as the boys were waiting, they started to grow very, very anxious because it had been 2 hours since they had left. So the family definitely grew suspicious, but they didn't call the police yet because they were like, oh, maybe he's rich, he has money, maybe he's just like out getting dinner for everybody or something. So they were really anxious, especially the mom, but she didn't call the police yet. But then that night, or not that night, the next day, though they still hadn't returned, the mom decided to call the police. So she called the police, told them the story, but then people really didn't, a lot of attention did not get brought to it because they were poor. And it was a very unfortunate case, but there was a lot happening elsewhere. See, Albert Fish was a serial killer, so there were a lot of other cases in other places. He had been abducting a couple people for a while now, so this child was not the police force's number one focus at the time, which is really sad, especially because it's a kid, and then it could have all been avoided. I'm not sure about this color. Oh, that actually works. But yeah, they were very upset with the way that law enforcement handled things, especially because there was no evidence. They didn't know the guy's name. They didn't know what car he drove. They didn't see the car. They just, they knew him by his alias. They knew what he looked like. But that's it. And it's back in the day when everybody dressed, if they had money, they dressed all the same. And this guy he had a very basic looking appearance. So they really did not know how to explain it to the police. So they had no evidence. They had nowhere to go off of. So the case did go cold for a long time. So there was this one officer who was very persistent. He did not want to drop the case. He didn't want to forget the case, especially because it was a little girl. Hi! It was a little girl, and he was very, he really, really wanted to solve the case. So this one guy, he obsessed over it for years and years. It had been 10 years since the abduction had taken place, and this guy was still looking for every single lead he could. He took every tip into consideration, and there were a lot of false leads, which is very frustrating for a case that had gone cold and had been a decade since it had occurred. And so this police officer actually ended up needing to go to the hospital. He fainted at his job on his desk due to exhaustion. He was obsessing over the case, and he fainted, so he ended up in the hospital. So after the hospital trip, he was given a desk job. And even with that desk job, he continued to focus on the case. He would not drop it. It had been 10 years. What's creepy, this or the story? But yeah, he didn't drop it. He continued the story. Yeah. He continued to work. It's a true story, by the way. Albert Fish. I forgot the year. Callie, if you're still on my live, would you be able to look it up and text me the year that this was? But yeah, this officer, God, I have a book on him. I don't want to discredit anybody or the names. This is the book I used, by the way. I do think it's really, really important to acknowledge who solved the case and the victims of the case. Otherwise, all the glory or the knowledge is left up to the killer, which they do not deserve. The family definitely deserves to get that recognition. It was in, let's see. Oh, I was very off. It's 1928. Yeah. 1928 is when it occurred. He used the alias the story. Albert Fish was very, very gruesome in his ways. I do agree, it's definitely underrated. He used the alias Frank Howard to trick the family. Um, Buds is the name. Grace Budd is the girl who was kidnapped. Grace Budd. Um, so, yeah, she was... I don't think it says her age anywhere in it. You found his wiki. You found his wiki page? That's crazy. So yeah, Grace. Grace Budd. Will King. Will King is the name of the investigator. So Will King still was investigating Grace Budd's case, and he was very persistent not to drop it because it was a child, and he felt very strongly. Yes, he is a cannibal. I will get to that. He felt very King, Will King felt very strongly on this case, so he did not want to drop it. He took every lead he could, and the family basically lost hope. A lot of the family, except for the mom, lost hope. Until one day, a breakthrough. Basically, the Budd family had received a letter. They received a letter. It didn't have a return address. They had no idea who it was from. They didn't recognize the handwriting or anything. But they received a letter, and I'm not going to read it. I do have it in the book, but it's quite gruesome, so I'm not going to share it with y'all. But basically, the summary of that letter said, my name is Frank Howard, which was not his real name. And he said, 10 years ago, I came over to hire your kids, intending to abduct him and kill him. I did not end up doing that because when your daughter came into the room, I changed my mind and I wanted to kidnap her. He specifically says, after she sat on my lap, I changed my mind and I decided I wanted to eat her. Which is horrendous. I really hope I'm not going to get demonetized because of this. Oh my god. Get up and drink water, people. Holy crap. I know, right? Feels like he was taunting the family, which is awful. So, he sent that, he sent that, letter, and then the family opened it. The family opened it, and they read it, which is horrendous. They had gotten direct instructions from Detective King, Will King, to not open any mail. I'm gonna turn this... Can y'all hear the music? There is music in the background. But yeah, Detective King told them not to open any letters that they got because then it would be considered contaminating evidence. You can? Okay, good. So yeah, they did end up opening the letter and reading it, which is awful because in the letter, it's a full confession of what Albert Fish did. He claims, I kidnapped your child. I know, I can't imagine what the family felt like. It must have been awful, especially because of how gruesome the letter is. Yeah. But yeah, I will read a little bit of the letter, just because I don't want to get anything wrong. I will quote him. It is very graphic, so I'm not going to say everything. Okay, this is what the letter stated. On Sunday, June 3rd, 1928, I called you at 406 West 15th Street. Grace Budd, sat in my lap and kissed me. I made up my mind to eat her. I'm not going to read everything, because I don't want to get demonetized. But yeah, you said, On the presence of taking her to a house party, you said yes, she can go. I took her to an empty house on West it's like Worcestershire sauce. What? On Westchester Street. Yes, to eat her. I took her to an empty house I had already picked out. When we got there, I told her to remain outside, and she picked wildflowers in the garden. I went upstairs, and I'm gonna skip this. Basically, he got naked. He went upstairs and he stripped. I knew if I did not, I would get blood on my clothes. It is absolutely disgusting, especially because this girl was a child. She was, I believe she was about 8 years old. When I was all ready, I went to the window and I called her. Then I hid in the closet and then until she got into the room. When she saw me unclothed, yeah, disgusting. When she saw me, she began to cry and run downstairs. I grabbed her and she said she would tell her mama. Isn't that so sad? She said she would tell her mama. First, he removed her clothes. And he says, how did she kick and bite? I'm not going to read this part, because I don't want to get demonetized, but basically he says he choked her to death, and then, the book is named, the Killer Book of Serial Killers. It has a lot of stories about different people, but yeah. He says, basically, after he strangled her, what's the name? Yeah, of course. He cut her up, which he says, and then he cooked her. And it says, quote, "It took me 9 days to eat her." He claims he did not SA her. He claims he did not. But he says, though I could have. Which is awful. He says, I did not, though I could have. That was a child. What an awful person. So after receiving this letter, 10 years after their child had been abducted, they sent the letter to Detective Will King, who at the time was working a desk job because of the exhaustion he had with the case. So he went to the manufacturer of the postcard. It does. So he went to the manufacturer of the postcard that from the letter that they had received. And they said that there was no way to track the letter. They did not know. They could not tell who the letter was from. There was no way of telling, they said. So Detective King really had to get creative with trying to track down where this letter came from. On the letter, sorry, I'm recovering from a cold. But on this letter, there were indentations of a brand. And so Detective King held the letter up into the light, and he could see the brand of the postcard. And that means he knew the office from which the postcard came from. So he went to that postcard place, because it was a business. It was a business that sent this card. So he went to this office building, and then he started questioning people. He says, does anybody know this handwriting? Does anybody know where this postcard came from? And then nobody came forward. So the boss of the place ended up taking the detectives back and saying, there was this person who had a job, but then he quit because he moved. So they went to question this guy, and then he did confess he had taken some postcards. He stole some postcards from the office, but then he left them at his old apartment. So they then tracked down the old apartment complex that this guy lived at, and they went up to the room, and they did, in fact, find postcards. It was at a part hotel, part apartment complex. So it was kind of like a long-term hotel. Not necessarily apartments, but kind of like a long-term hotel, you know? So he went, or the Will King, Detective Will King, went to this place, and then he questions the girl at the front. And then they said, the girl at the front said, yeah, this creepy guy, his name is Albert Fish, has been renting that specific unit. So they decided to do a stakeout at that apartment complex. So they, Will King and his partner, I do not recall who that is, I apologize. I don't think it says it in the book. But they went to this apartment complex, and then they did a stakeout. And then they started waiting. They just waited outside for this guy to come back. And then finally, when he returned, they went into his room, and they tried to take him down, but then he ran. When Fish ran, he ended up attempting assault on a police officer, but then he failed. They tackled him, and he was arrested. And almost immediately, he confessed to kidnapping. Yes, they did stake out to catch the guy, and he did not return for an entire week. I actually skipped a part. Thank you for asking. Basically, the first day that they did the stakeout, he didn't come back. The second day they did the stakeout, he didn't come back. And that went on for the first week that they staked out. So they just decided to have the girl at the front, the manager, call the police if Fish returned. But they assumed he would not return, having the guilty conscience and probably trying to escape. So they doubted Fish would return, so they didn't spend too much time staking out. But he did end up returning, and the girl at the front desk told the officers, he likely will only be here for a couple hours, so you need to come now. That is when they came and got him. It's really hard to draw very small details while I'm talking. Oh, that is so hard to do. Okay. Anyways. So yes, the officers took him down and took him into questioning, and he confessed pretty much immediately. He confessed to kidnapping and murder. Yeah, of course. Kidnapping and murder of Grace Budd. So, after Grace Budd's case was solved, 10 years later, 10 years after it happened, which is very sad, but at least the family had gotten closure. But they were still wondering, where's the body? Where is Grace Budd's remains? And so then he confessed to cannibalizing her, which he did say in the letter, but he confirmed it with the police. Yes, I did, in fact, cannibalize her. So the police were very skeptical because seeing how this guy responded to being caught and how he so easily confessed, they were very skeptical that this was Albert Fish's first murder. They did not think that Albert Fish had only hurt Grace Budd. So after they pressured him, he did confess to more killings. And I do not recall most of those, just because this is the most famous case of Grace Budd. But he did confess to killing more, which then police were able to link him to many of the disappearances at that time, which would be in the 1920s and 1930s. Oh my god. Holy cow. So yeah, after he confessed, they started looking into Albert Fish a bit more and going more into his childhood. He was a masochist, which basically means you enjoy pain. So he would find pleasure in pain, quite literally, like physically find pleasure in the pain, which is to each their own, but okay. He was sentenced to death. Fortunately, he was sentenced to the electric chair, and the rumor is that they actually had to shock him twice due to the fact that he had metal pins paint on himself. Sadist is enjoying pain inflicted on others. Masochist is when you enjoy pain yourself. So this guy would enjoy pain. And he was sentenced to death, and the rumor is it took them 2 shocks to kill him because he had a lot of pins in his body. This guy had a habit of poking himself with pins because he found pleasure in that. So there would be pins stuck like an inch deep, like an inch or further. A couple of them I think were about maybe 4 inches deep into his skin. But he's telling the police he would do this and then he wasn't able to get the pins back out. So after he would inflict this pain on himself, he was not able to retrieve the pins. So when they did an x-ray on his body, they found, I think there were, oh god, I'm gonna be so wrong on this. I think that there were about 30 to 40 pins in him. Don't quote me on that. But a lot of them were in his scrotum. There were a lot of pins stuck in his scrotum. Apologies. So, forgive me. Forgive my family. So, yeah, there were a lot of pins stuck in his body because he would enjoy the pain. So, rumor is it did take 2 shocks to kill him once he was put on the electric chair. Yeah. Definitely an ick. Oh, hello, Callie. So yeah, they, found out more about him after his death. He was abused as a child by his mother, which does not give him an excuse to murder people, but it definitely does give insight on, it definitely does give insight, on this guy's life. He, do we like the music or should I turn it off? So yeah, he was abused as a child. His mother, on multiple occasions would hold his hand over a, stovetop as a form of punishment. He would also be, spanked in school, because that used to be allowed, but then he admits to police he actually found pleasure in being punished, which is unsettling, to say the least. So, after, police, sentenced him to death, nobody came forward. Like, no family members, no, past experiences with him. Basically, it seemed like he had nobody. He recalls his mother being an awful person. I don't remember what he said his father was like, but if his mother was like that, I would assume his father wasn't much better. And so Albert Fish would also struggle with bedwetting, which is very, very common with serial killer to-bes. So, note to self, if your child wets the bed, or abuses animals, doesn't have many friends, or is very antisocial, go see a psychologist. Just saying. So yeah, he, where the heck did that brush go? Found it! So yeah, he, didn't have a lot of friends at a young age, and then, he was a bedwetter. We heard this from his mother later on, because his mother would finally come forward years later, and so he, the mother claimed he was a awful child. So she said he wet the bed, and he was very antisocial, didn't have a lot of friends. She said that he was a very awkward kid. And that she really kind of didn't like her own child. So bedwetting is actually very common amongst serial killers. The reason being, bedwetting is linked a lot to stress. It is linked to not being able to process emotions, not being able to have a lot of self-control. So bedwetting is linked to stress, which if a child continues to... Yeah, it was definitely... The form of punishment definitely wasn't the best. So the mother definitely could have improved. But it still does not give Albert Fish an out. Like, he did try to plead insanity, but it was said that he was perfectly fine. He was perfectly fit to stand trial. Later on, though, people do believe that he had schizophrenia, which a lot of serial killers have schizophrenia. So I'm not saying don't take my words out of context. Even though a lot of serial killers have schizophrenia, schizophrenia does not cause serial killers. Those are totally different things. It is just common for serial killers to have schizophrenia. But not all schizophrenics are horrible people. Just saying. So yeah, he supposedly had schizophrenia, but that was not recognized at the time of his death, so he was put to death over 10 years after committing this crime, which is very sad. But at least the Buds got got justice for their daughter. But it's a disgusting being. He is just an awful human being, even though he had a hard childhood, does not excuse anything that he did. So, yeah. I'm trying to think if there are any other details about him that need to be shared. If y'all want to see a picture of him real quick, he's actually just on the front cover. That is him. Does not look very friendly. That is Albert Fish. He did say that he was bullied a lot as a child. But again, bullying does not create a serial killer, so that is not an excuse. If y'all have any questions about him, let me know. I'm gonna try to answer the best I could. Yeah, no. I thought he would look kind of chubbier, you know? I thought he would look more like a grandpa, like a friendly grandpa, because they said he looked wealthy. So, wealthy people tend to eat more. I would assume he was more friendlier looking, you know? But he definitely was not. So yeah, that's the story of Albert Fish and Grace Budd. Rest in peace, Grace Budd. go to hell. Albert Fish. What color contacts do you think I should do with this makeup look? I could do definitely not red. Maybe a white contact here? And then just leave this one normal? What do we think? I'm thinking 2 different contacts. For sure. I'm not sure, though. Okay, well. I'm gonna end the live. If y'all have any other serial killer story, white and blue. Oh, yeah, I could. Yeah, I naturally have blue eyes, so I could do a white contact and then just keep my normal blue eye. Or I could do a different blue-colored contact that I have. I guess I'll just decide that later. So yeah, if you guys would like to hear about any other serial killers, let me know. I know a lot of serial killers and a lot of stories, so I'm thinking every Friday I'm going to go live and share a serial killer story. So let me know if you have any requests, and hope y'all enjoyed the story. Thank you for joining. Oh, thank you. Okay. Well, it's been fun telling you the story. Hopefully I will be able to do this again next week.